Good morning. How are you all? I think all of you know me here. You all are ex-students. Any B.Ed students? Yes. So we have B.Ed as well as DLED students. I guess all of you all know me. I am Alisha Dakunia. I'm from the DLED department. So I teach psychology of development and psychology of learning for the first years, and for the second years I teach principles of evaluation and school administration and classroom management. So principal is a little busy. She's in the DED hall for a function. But anyways, on behalf of our principal, Sister Delia Antau, I welcome all of y'all, our dearest ex-students, both from the B.Ed as well as DLED section, for today's session, which is based on child development and pedagogy. After my session, teacher Swati is going to take the Konkani session. So as you know, there is paper 1 and paper 2, and this is the first time that the government of Goa has introduced this exam, the teacher eligibility test, the Goa teacher eligibility test. Don't worry, we are all new at this, but we are going to try our level best, and today I am here to share all that I know about this subject. So some of you may not answer paper 2, but that's fine. Uh, I want all of you all to attend the entire lecture, the whole session, because it's only a few topics which are added in paper 2, just 3 or 4 topics, otherwise more or less it's the same portion. So I want to ask you, how many of you are clearing GTET this time? I repeat, how many of you are clearing GTET this time? I know that all of you all are appearing, but how many of you are clearing GTET this time? Not many hands are raised. There's only this one girl here who put her hand up in blue. What about the rest of you? Some hands are going up halfway, then they put their hands down. They're so hesitant. Come on, you all are future teachers. You all have to be bold and confident and assertive and outspoken. Come on, tell me, how many of you are going to clear GTET this time? I want all of you all to raise your hands up and say, I will clear GTET this time. Words have power. What you say, you believe in. And what you believe in, you automatically start acting in that direction. Now, as you know, maybe some of you all don't know, this exam has always been there. It is actually called CTET. It's a centralized exam, but this is for the first time that government of Goa is having this exam, and it is called GTET. Okay, but otherwise CTET has always been there. Now I asked you all, how many of you are clearing GTET this time, and I know that most of you all, and we are all new at this, but I want to tell you that some of my ex students have answered this exam before. Even last year, two of my students answered and they cleared. So please don't be with this misconception that this is a very difficult exam and I will just not be able to do it. Maybe it is difficult because the portion, you may find it a little vast, but it is not an impossible thing. People have attempted and cleared this exam in the first go. Okay, so I want you to feel confident and believe in yourself, and you will be able to do it. I also want to ask you at this point of time, do you think it is possible for me to teach you everything that you studied in 2 years in 2 hours today? Is it possible? Is it practical? No, it is not. So today what I'm going to do with you is I am going to clear some concepts. So concept clarification. I will revise the theories with you. Also, I'm sure you have the information bulletin which is issued by the SERT. So there is the syllabus that is there prescribed in that information bulletin. So what I've done at my end is that I have referred to the syllabus, analyzed it, and tried to tell in each of the subtopics what exactly or what are the subtopics that you need to cover. Okay. There is no need to write down things as I'm explaining. I will share this PPT with you all, but what I write on the green board here and there, that you may take down. Okay, it was not really possible to include everything onto the PowerPoint, so there will be some things which I will write on the board. You may take those points down. So let's get started. Structure. As you know, there is paper 1, paper 2. So teachers who are answering paper 1, you qualify to teach up till standard 5. So under this we have child development and pedagogy, language 1, language 2, mathematics and EVS. Paper 2 we have child development and pedagogy, language 1, language 2, math and science, or social sciences or social studies. Okay. So let's start. So your first topic is child development. From here you will get 10 questions. Okay. So concept of development and its relationship with learning. So when we talk about development, we always discuss growth and development. Okay. Sometimes people use these words interchangeably, but they are two different things. You know that. So under this you have to know meaning of growth and development, stages of growth and development, then each of those stages. Which are the stages that we have? Yes, we have infancy, then which is 0 to 2 years, or from birth to 2 years. Then we have childhood, we have early childhood, middle childhood, late childhood. Then we have adolescence, which is puberty, and late adolescence and adulthood. Okay, the later stages of life are not that important for you, but these stages are more important. Now when we talk about growth, what is growth? Anybody can answer? Would you like to answer what is growth? So growth is something that is in physical standards: height of a person, weight of a person, complexion, all physical aspects. Okay, those are growth. Development is to do with more of the maturity of the person. Okay, so growth is lifelong or development is lifelong? Development, they say, is lifelong. Okay, womb to the tomb, whereas growth will stop after a particular point of time. Okay, so that you need to know. Then at each of those stages of life, especially childhood, you need to know the developmental tasks at each of those stages. Okay, now what are the various areas of development? We have physical and motor development, then we have emotional development, social and cognitive, and language and moral development. Okay, then you need to know the differences between growth and development and maturation. Then when we talk about emotions and emotionality of children, how they pick up emotions, how do emotions serve as a source of knowledge and transfer of information, then the interaction of maturation and development in the process of learning and for learning, and then role of teachers and educational implications. Please know that you are studying anything and everything, let's say under child development and pedagogy, any theory or whatsoever, you need to know what is the interplay of the teacher and the pupil. Why are you learning this theory? What are the classroom implications of that particular theory? What is the meaning of educational implications or classroom implication? Basically the application of that theory. Okay, how will you use that theory, or how will the knowledge of that theory help you? That is what it is. So physical growth and development describes the physical as well as psychomotor changes in an individual Mental development includes such abilities such as perceiving, observing, thinking, solving problems, reasoning, sensation, imagination, concentration, etc. Emotional development refers to development and the attainment of emotional maturity, awareness of people's feelings, self control, and managing negative feelings. Moral development is when children are small, they do not know the concept of right and wrong or good versus bad. This sense develops with time, and this itself refers to moral or character development. Then language, is a communication system that involves using words and systematic rules to organize those words to transmit information from one individual to another. While language is a form of communication, not all communication is language. We know that. Then, talking about social development, we know that at birth the child is neither social nor antisocial or unsocial. A young child, however, at times is seen to be antisocial because the children tend to get naughty. But when the child grows up, he develops some social behavior which makes him or her an acceptable social being. Okay, so these are the areas of growth and development. All right. Then we have causes of individual differences. As far as I can remember, this is module 2 in the DLED syllabus. Okay, so we have individual differences, and what are the prime causes of individual differences? Heredity and environment. Please fix your glance onto the screen. Yes, look at that figure there. Yes, so we have individual differences which are inherited or which are genetic. Okay, biological reasons are involved for those differences, whereas we have acquired or environmental, psychological, or social reasons via which people will differ. So this concept of nature nurture, right? Okay, so over time scientists have always been debating about the influence, which one is having more influence, is it nature or is it nurture? So under inherited aspects we have physical, so your body type, your structure, bone musculature, height, weight, type of hair, skin, eye color, all that. Okay, then we have mental. Mental will be mostly to do with cognition, IQ. And then we have temperamental. Temperamental means more to do with your mood states. Okay, you must have heard this, no? Hot headed, calm and composed, reacts easily, or doesn't react easily. All these are temperamental states of a person. And on the other side we have acquired, so social, cultural reasons, educational factors, emotional factors.
What you should be interested in, factors that contribute of a person, kinds of emotions, universal emotions, and emotionality in childhood. Quickly tell me what are basic emotions or universal emotions in people? Emotions that are felt and experienced all around the world. Which are they? Happiness, sadness, anger, grief, fear, okay, disgust, okay, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. Five basic, and there are others, okay. The emotionality in childhood, how people or how children pick up emotions, how they learn from emotions, and the purpose of emotions, okay. How do emotions help us to understand, okay. Okay, then we have our very famous Piaget's theory. Some people, there's no in between like this theory. Some people love this theory, some people hate this theory. So I don't know which category you are. Now, quick tip I give you. There are other theories also, but understand something. When you want to learn a theory, first you understand the theorist. Automatically, you will understand the theory better. For example, you have a friend, let's say. You all have no friends. So you have a friend. When a person is your friend, you want to know more about that friend. Like who is at the home of the friend. It's about your family. Does my friend have a pet? What food does my friend like? What is my friend's taste in fashion, food, music? So what are you trying to do? Know the personal characteristics of the person. So you want to gauge a theory nicely, okay, have it like visualize what he looks like. Yes, most of the pictures that we have of him on the internet are when he's a little older, right? So can you visualize a man in a black coat and he mostly wears that turbanish hat, like an older figure. Try to get his picture in your mind. Okay, then you can understand the theory better. Jean Piaget is also called the father of child psychology. He is also a biologist. He is a Swiss psychologist. Swiss means he is from Switzerland. He is also a genetic epistemologist. Okay, so he already had a lot of biology background. So from there came his interest in children and how children learn, how cognition happens. That came later on. Okay, so his base is what genetics. Okay, now when we want to understand Piaget's theory, before you understand the stages, there are some key concepts that you need to know about Piaget's theory. Okay, so Piaget's cognitive development. First, okay. So Piaget's theory has some key concepts. The first one is schema. Ever came across this word anywhere? Yes. What is schema? Basic mental representation of anything around a person is a schema. Understanding of a book, a pen, a fan, a wall, anything and everything. The basic mental representation that is called a schema. So we as people or children constantly are updating and upgrading their schemas that they have. Okay, schema or schemata. So that upgradation is happening with the process of other key processes. Okay, also, that upgradation is called adaptation. Okay. What is adaptation? Otherwise, you heard this word somewhere, right? What is adaptation? I heard this word when I was in school. You must have heard this word because of some other person, not Piaget. Some other scientist. Can you remember? To adapt to the environment. Survival of the fittest and all, never heard. So, who was that person? Thank you, Charles Darwin. So, his theory of evolution. Okay. So there also there is this mention of adaptation. I told you, Jean Piaget was also a biologist. Okay. So adaptation means there it was more in the understanding of adapting to the environment. Here also it is understanding that you adapt to the environment, but more in cognitive terms. Okay, there it was more in terms of survival as a species, as a race. Okay, but here it is more for children. So adaptation is a process via which children build their schemas, or that is also something that is equilibration. You heard the word equilibrium or homeostasis? Any science students here? Equilibration of homeostasis. So equilibrium means balance. Disequilibration means imbalance. Okay. So children when they have a schema, they see the schema, they understand the schema, and then they are peace with the schema. That's the time that they are in equilibration. But when they see something new, they don't understand it. What will they do? They start asking you questions. That's why Piaget said that children are little scientists or little researchers. They see something, they don't understand it, automatically those questions come. Okay? So they ask you until and unless they get a satisfying answer, they will not be at peace. You tell children, tomorrow we'll go to Mapsa for shopping. Tomorrow, not today, tomorrow. But this full day and night, how it will pass? With questions, what time we are going, why we are going, how we are going, will we buy this, will we come, will we eat, all those questions will come. Okay? So, you understand what is equilibration and disequilibration, right? So, it's, see, I'm trying to give you how they are connected, okay? Please don't get confused, you can always ask questions, raise your hand, ask the question. So, you're building schema or schemata via a process of equilibration or in state of equilibration and disequilibration with other key processes. One of them is adaptation. Okay. Now adaptation happens with other two processes, which is assimilation and accommodation. Okay. So it's like you adapt with by assimilating and accommodating. Over and over again, people find, I don't know why, these two words very, very confusing. Okay? I'll give you a simple method to understand this. You just believe that assimilating means adding and accommodating means modifying. Let me tell you something. It's never either or, okay? It's mostly from here to here. So you assimilate and then you accommodate. It's mostly like this. Okay? And we will do this right now in the class. But before that, you understand that assimilating means mostly adding to previous information, and accommodating means adding with accommodation the previous information that you have. Okay? Now, quick activity. Close your eyes and think of an apple. Think of an apple. You done thinking? Yes? Now open your eyes. Quickly tell me or describe the apple that you thought of. Red shining, okay. Red shining apple. Reflection of the light on the apple. Nice. Good abstract thinking. Okay. Most people are going with red colored apple. How many? Raise of hands. Okay, most, like 98%. Okay, few maybe not. Okay, so most of y'all have the same mental representation of an apple. That is a nice looking, healthy, red colored apple. Okay, now the reason for this is because we all studied about the apple being a good, nice, juicy, big, red, fat, red colored apple. Okay, you must have all eaten the apple before you learned about the apple. Right or wrong? Your mom must have mashed an apple and given you when you were small, right? But you studied about the apple when A for apple, that's the time you studied about the apple. Didn't you? And when you were studying about an apple, your teacher mostly 99% showed you a red colored apple or showed you a chart which had a red colored apple. Then when you started drawing the apple in kindergarten, again you drew an apple and filled it in color which was cherry red. Okay, this is the reason why most of you all had the same mental representation of an apple. But then as you grew up, you also got to know, like how Mitali was saying, she thought of a green colored apple. Okay, exception to the rule. But then as you grew up, you also realize that there are other varieties of apple. Some apples are green in color, some apples are yellowish in color. Then you also got to know small apple, big apple, Kashmiri apple, Irani apple, different types, right? Expensive, cheap apples, and so on. But that happened with time and as you grew up. So as you grew up, you assimilated and you accommodated. You added to previous information, you modified that previous information, and you have a new schema of an apple. Is that clear? Any questions? Clear? Okay. Every exam, educational exam, always has at least one question which has to do with Piaget. That paper doesn't come without questions on Piaget's theory. So learn this theory properly. And after that, we have the four stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, complete operational, and formal operational. Out of these four stages, the first three stages are more important to you. Okay, but you also have to learn the other stages. So sensory motor is where the senses of the body are the teacher or the teaching agent to the child. Quickly tell me which are the senses of the body. Just tell me five, no need for seven or nine. Sight or eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Okay, so these are the senses of the body which are the teachers of the child. Piaget said means children acquire information or they try to communicate via the senses of the body. Sensory motor, the other word that is motor. You know, we have motor skills, we have gross motor skills and fine motor skills. But in infancy, which skills are mostly used or which one is more there, more developed? Gross motor skills. Finer motor skills will happen later with time. Okay, finger dexterity and all that comes later. So it's mostly gross motor skills and senses of the body. So you know how children hold things and all, right? They can't hold like us. They mostly go for the grab, right? Like this. Or the other movements of the body, like the hand and leg movement is more like the swimming motion, right? Because in the womb they are in liquid and they are constantly swimming. Okay. Then we have the pre-operational thinking stage. So that's from 2 to 7 years. So two important things that happen, two more important things that happen at the second stage. Toilet training and the child goes to school for the first time. Also, I just forgot to mention sensory motor stage. Another key concept of importance is object permanence. You remember what is object permanence? Yes? You show an object to the child, and when you put it away, the child thinks that the object is no more there. That means there is no object permanence skill that is developed. Means out of sight is out of mind. Okay? But if the object is shown to the child, and let's say the parent puts it under a pillow, hides it behind, and the child thinks that I cannot see it, but the object is still there. It means that object permanence skill has already been developed. Okay. Great. It is there. So let's see, I'm showing you this. What is your child? You are like this, you're playing. I hide it. First, looking in that direction because you know that it is over. Okay. Any questions with object permanence? Yeah. Okay. Then we have pre-operational thinking, some more concepts to understand, principle of conservation and reversible. Can be anything, some juice or something, let's say, okay? And there are two classes. Sorry for the horrible drawing, but I said there are two glasses, okay? One is like a tall juice glass, and one is like a short scotch type glass, okay? And both of these are filled with, they are filled with 500 ml of liquid. A child will choose which one? This one. Why? Because children think that because it's like a taller glass, there is more in this. Okay, you must have seen, no? You can say that children who have conserved will do this. You give them a chocolate or anything, a sweet, and break it. They try to measure and see which one is the bigger one. That means they understand, or rather, they go by the sight that something that looks big is also big. Like here, the glass is tall, so it seems like there is more liquid here, but not necessarily the case. Okay, conservation. Then reversibility is, try to understand with a puppy. You know, sometimes small dogs, okay, puppies, they follow you. Let's say they follow you to a spot, and then you disappear. You've gone by. They cannot go back home. Do you know that? Why? Because they are small and they can't, that route or that path, they can't, they don't have a mental map of that route, okay? But, and same is with children, when children are very small, mostly they are dropped, not, of course, there are other safety reasons, but they can go forward in a direction, but they can't really come back in the same direction, they will get lost. Like in a fair, if the child is lost, no, you go to Old Goa and places like this, all the time the announcements happen, please come and take this child, and but they get lost in these fairs and festivals and all because of this reason. Okay, reversibility, they don't know, it's like lost. Fine, but if the skill is developed, then they can come back in that same direction that they have moved forward. Okay. So things like this you will have to revise. I mean, everything that happens at each stage you have to understand uh, and know the hallmarks of each of those stages in detail. Okay. Then concepts of child-centered and progressive education. Child-centered means the focus of the method is the student or the pupil, okay, and not the who, not the teacher, okay. So this is a contemporary topic, contemporary because now it has gained more importance, momentum, but a very important topic, okay. So in olden times, if we have two vessels, okay, one is, let's say, the teacher and one is the pupil. In olden times, they used to say that the pupil is an empty vessel, okay. I don't know if you've heard about tabula rasa. So the pupil is empty, doesn't know anything, whereas the teacher knows everything. So from the teacher, we pour in the pupil. This is what they said. Okay. This is old thought, or this is the thought in teacher-centered education or approach. Whereas in child-centered approach, it is believed that the child or the pupil already has a lot of information. Okay, reason because children are constantly living in a physical world which has other components and socializing agents, or the physical world is having social and cultural factors from which also children are learning. Okay, another thing is nowadays even small children can use mobiles and tabs and all, right? Have they gone to school? Do they know alphabets? Do they know numbers, language? Nothing. But can't they use gadgets? This is the best example of agreeing with the fact that children already have prior knowledge. Also, today we live in a world of information overload. You just go to Google, type a word, what do you get? Lots of web pages, okay? Or any of you have a smart TV at home? A smart TV, or TV on which you get like as good as your phone, you get all your YouTube and Woot and Netflix and everything, a smart TV. So I have a smart TV at home. My father does not know how to use the internet. Okay, he can make calls, receive calls. He is not the WhatsApp and all that person, but he uses that smart TV very efficiently. You wonder how. You know, those remotes now come with the audio command, right? You can just hold the remote and say the word and it flashes out there. This is information overload. So in today's world, you don't really need real skills to use and make technology a part of your daily existence. So children also are living in the same world, right? They may not have great skills, but they have these skills which can give them a lot of information. So already when a child is going to school, the child is going with a mental representation of the world. Okay? So what child-centered or progressive education says that this information that the child has, let us work on that information and enhance the child. This is what we are saying. So it is more of a practical approach, more of a hands-on approach, or learning by doing approach. Okay, not mugging and not rote learning, but more of experiences or experiential learning. Okay, so there are some important features and characteristics of a progressive school. It de-emphasizes the use of textbooks. You know, those textbooks that we have sometimes have been used by teachers for the last 20 years and all. And sometimes, and I request you not to be that type of teacher who cannot come out of the textbooks. I hope you know that even textbooks can have errors sometimes. Yes. I even know some teachers who know that textbooks so well that they even know the page numbers of the textbook and the topic that is given in the textbook, what a picture is there on that page. Because they never, maybe, I don't know, try to move out of that textbook, or they are too glued to the textbook when it comes to teaching. But new things happen every day. Even if the textbook is not changing, we need to change and upgrade the information that we share in the classroom, right? So progressive teaching de-emphasizes the use of bookish or methodological dogmatic teaching. Okay. Another feature is that it talks about collaborative group work. Collaborative group work is also a feature of inclusive education. It says that people come together and learn from each other. Okay. Another feature is critical thinking, problem solving. Basically, these are skills that children will need as people in life for daily living. Practical situations, real life situations is the focus of progressive education. Okay. Also, right there, John Locke. Go and find out more about him. John Locke. Then John Dewey, or Dewey is the father of progressive education. He is also called father of pragmatism and all, but even him, a very important person that you need to know about is John Dewey, father of progressive education. Then Rousseau, there's not much that is usually asked about Rousseau, but mentioned there, Emily. There was this very famous novel from Rousseau. MEG. It focused on the innocence of the child. Usually before that there were these beliefs that children are, evil, or so he de-emphasized that and he said that children are innocent, okay, and they can be molded in ways. Then Friedrich Froebel, I believe, is from Germany, and he had his lab schools, and he came with methods of effective teaching. One of his very famous method is the kindergarten method. So he compared children to plants. Kinder means child, so garden, okay. No, we have adopted that method of kindergarten. So that is from Froebel. And then we have Dr. Maria Montessori. So Madam Maria gave us the Montessori method. So key feature of her method is that the hand is the teacher of the child. So children learn from their own hand, she said. So basically again, hands-on learning or practical learning was the focus of Madam Maria Montessori. Okay. Then, talking about intelligence, lots of theories about intelligence are there, but I am trying to pick out, the main concepts. So, intelligence, the very basic classification of intelligence was general, social, and vocational intelligence in types. Okay. So, in general intelligence or the G factor, we talk about general cognition or intelligence, and S factor, we talk about specific cognition or task-oriented intelligence. Okay, let's see. You would say so and so person is very good at glass painting, or somebody very good at handicrafts. Okay, it's like a specific skill. So specific cognition. In other types or theories, we have Robert Sternberg's triarchic theory. So he gave us practical, creative, and analytical intelligence. So practical intelligence is, people who are good with life, you say. Okay, they say, some people are good at school, some people are good at life. So practical intelligence is that type of intelligence which makes people very street smart. Okay, they can get out of situations and stuff. Then we have analytical intelligence, which is more academic, a person's ability to rationalize and think in, ways in which they can analyze big chunks of information. And then we have creative intelligence, which makes a person think in novel ways or ideas. Okay, newness, thought that is new. Okay, then another very famous theory is that of theory of multiple intelligences. So we have earlier it was 7 types, but now it is 9 types of intelligence. Okay. Now let's understand the types, but I want you to do something. For each of the type of intelligence, you will give me an example of a person that you can think of with that type of intelligence. Okay, fine. So the first one is verbal or linguistic. People who are good with words, language, vocabulary, diction, phonetic sounds, everything to do with mostly speaking, elocution. Can you think of any person? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay. Any other person? Your Shashi Tharoor, then Oprah, right? Mostly people who, Ellen DeGeneres, people who have these talk shows and all, they are good now with linguistics. Then even your English teacher for that matter. Okay. Then we have mathematical, logical intelligence. Any person you can think of? Yes.
Arya.
APJ Abdul Kalam. Yes. Next one. Musical intelligence. Give me a goal example this time. Any musician that you can think of, singer, person good with music arrangement, sequences, sounds, rhythm, timbre, Remo Fernandez, okay, Lorna, Chris Perry, Alfred Rose, A.R. Rahman, okay. Okay. Then we have visual spatial intelligence, ability for spatial or abstract thinking, your 2D, 3D, 4D, you can think in those cross dimensions. Any person you can think of? Sculptors, painters, Pablo Picasso, any other? Leonardo da Vinci, yeah? Okay. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, ability of a person for yoga, physical education, dance, gymnastics, ice skating. Anyone you can think of? Or Amir? Come on. Very calm. And yes, somebody? Sachin Tendulkar, okay. Then we have people with interpersonal intelligence. People who are very good at dealing with other people are mostly people with interpersonal intelligence. So, therapists, counselors, social workers, doctors, nurses, they need this type of intelligence. Any person you can think of? Your family doctor, does he have interpersonal intelligence? Sulaksha, Sulaksha ma'am. Oh yes, from Atma Shodhana said. Yes, good. Okay. Then we have intrapersonal intelligence. Actually, emotional intelligence is interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence, right? Intrapersonal intelligence is when you can understand, use, perceive, manage your own emotions. So, researchers, theorists, philosophers, people who are very self-reflective, okay? Then, naturalist intelligence, intelligence for nature, understanding, the environment, atmosphere, natural processes around. Any person you can think of? Environmentalist. Bear Grylls from Discovery National Geography. Okay, best example that I could think of. Existential intelligence. People who have a very deep understanding of life and they can make you think as to why certain processes take place emotionally, psychologically, people who can make you think about your own selves and understand your own emotions. Anyone? They can actually tell you how to live life, people who have this intelligence. Gupta, okay. Your Jay Shetty, everybody knows Jay Shetty, he has this intelligence. Okay. Let's move ahead. Okay. Then we have Sir Francis Galton. He's also called the father of intelligence or measurement of intelligence or the full concept of intelligence. Now, he actually started with, he's a pioneer in the measurement of individual differences. How we are different, why we are different, what makes us different. Intelligence is one construct in individual differences. Okay. Then we also have this normal distribution curve that you see there. What's the shape of that curve? It's a well-shaped curve. So, as you know, most of us fall in the which category? We fall in the average, right? So you have high average, middle average, and low average. And we also have the extremes. So if you are talking about intelligence, what will the extremes be of intelligence? We will have IQ of 70 and below, which will be borderline intelligence. Okay, borderline, and then you have MR. MR means mental retardation, different types are there, mild, profile. That not so important. But you have borderline, and this side you will have, yes, genius, right? Genius or gifted children, prodigy child. So that will be one extreme, borderline will be another extreme, and most of us will be in the average. Now, all of you have watched this movie, Koi Mil Gaya. Yes? Hrithik Roshan movie. You watched, right? What is the main concept or central idea of that movie? Don't say alien. Yes, alien also. I mean, a lot of people didn't know about aliens, and then I think that was a Hindi movie that enlightened people about aliens. And yeah, that sold the movie. But the key concept is IQ. What is he in that movie? Where he is young, right? He is borderline or slightly retarded, right? You know, his friends used to be children, and he was way older than them. And what was happening is he was not getting promoted to the next class. Why? Because he was mentally retarded or a slow learner, or you can say he had learning disabilities. Actually, no, he could not learn very well. Then came that sequel of that movie. After Going India came the part one of that movie, or the first sequel. There are three movies now. After that came which movie? Krish. Then in that what they showed, where genius, gifted. What were his gifts? He could climb mountains, his intelligence was super good, and he would communicate with birds and whatnot, right? So they have shown contrasting characteristics of people. That is what they have shown. So the main central idea, the key concept of the movie is actually IQ. Okay? Because they show two straight opposites in terms of intelligence. One way of understanding the normal distribution curve. Okay? Okay, moving forward. Okay. Certain people that are very important. One is, of course, Francis Galton in intelligence. Then we have Alfred Binet, who was from France. He invented the first practical IQ test. It's called the Binet-Simon test. So Simon was he was his student, then he was someone who worked along with him, Theodore Simon. And then they came up with this test. They also revised their own test. So there have been other revisions of the Simon Binet-Simon test. Okay. Then the first test came from these people, but then the first time the concept of IQ came from William Stern. So don't be confused among them. Okay, these are all contributors in the field of intelligence, but the first timers, just be careful to know them. Okay. So the concept of intelligence quotient, like how you have units to measure things, he said, same way IQ or intelligence also has a unit which is IQ. This is what William Stern said. Okay. Then he mentioned about IQ, and of course because of the scale we had classifications of IQ, but then we had to actually measure IQ of a person, and that formula, that is IQ equals to LA upon CA into 100, was given by Lewis Terman. Okay, so LA stands for mental age, CA stands for chronological age. Now see, chronological age is the actual age of the person. Means from the time the person is born until the person is there on the face of the earth. Okay. Mental age is the mental ability of the person. Now let's say you get a question in the paper. Of course, you will solve it. But the minute you read the question, and in the question you see that the mental age is higher than the chronological age, your answer has to be towards higher IQ side or lower IQ side? Higher IQ side. But if the chronological age of a person is higher than the mental age of the person, it means the IQ is on the lower side. Okay? So this is the mostly accepted Stanford Binet IQ classification. So I told you 70 and below is mostly borderline and then below. And then you have something from 90 to 119, which is like mostly the average. So you can be anywhere in between the average. And mind you, it is not just about intelligence, any construct you see, even physical appearances for that person. Most of us are average looking, right? And there will be very few who are extremely beautiful. So this is like an accepted norm. Fine, even in your classroom, everybody will get the first rank. No, there will be mostly who are average achievers, 4, 5, 6 or maybe maximum 8, 9 students who are like the high achievers. And again, there will be a few who are underachievers, okay, who may need help or remediation. Okay. These are some examples of standardized intelligence tests. Now, the Raven-Scudder progressive matrices is the one that is used for children. The previous one, the Raven's progressive matrices is for adults. Okay. Then this Bhatia test of intelligence is Indian intelligence test. Fine. And then we have the other ones. So this concept of testing intelligence came right from the days of World War, where they wanted to recruit soldiers. So because they wanted the best of people to be in the army, this full testing of intelligence actually came by. Okay. Then we have classification of intelligence tests. So there are individual tests, there are group tests. If I am a test administrator and let's say she is a test taker and I am doing a one-on-one testing of intelligence, which is me and her, let's say, then it is a individual test. Okay. But if I am administering an intelligence test for a group of people, it is a group intelligence. Simple. Then we have verbal tests, non-verbal tests or performance tests. So verbal tests are mostly to do with language. Non-verbal tests are task-oriented. Okay. Then we also have speed and power tests. Your GTET is a speed test or a power test? It's speed test or power test? Come on, apply your brains. Speed test or power test? It is both. You have a time limit, right? And it is also checking how many you will get correct. How many test items you will get correct. So it is both speed and power test. Some uses of intelligence tests, diagnosis, prognosis, certification, ranking, classification, grading, lots of uses. Okay. And lastly, very important use of intelligence test is in research. There are some demerits also of intelligence tests. Quickly I'll tell you, see what happens is sometimes the language comes in the picture. Okay, now even English for that matter, how Indians speak English is different, how somebody from Kenya, Kenyans with Jamaicans, Europeans, even language accents, they are different, right? So sometimes you can say one disadvantage or demerit or like a fault in intelligence testing is when language becomes a barrier in intelligence testing. Also maybe bias, personal bias or other types of errors There could be other confounding variables where the person is answering the test, when the person is answering the test. All these kind of delimitations are there in the personal intelligence testing. Then factors affecting intelligence of a person, or how intelligence will differ, how it will be enhanced. Factors are mostly genetic, environmental, or societal. So poverty, race, ethnicity, simple things like, let's say, some very secluded or marginalized society, how they perceive something is totally different from people who are developing or developed. Okay, simple things like maybe plastic bottles is something that they have never seen there. So their concept attainment is different from people who have already experienced life differently. Okay, so obviously intelligence will be different, fine, or maybe intelligence is there, but it has not developed. Okay, then family and school environment. Sometimes children have this issues because of family, like let's say fighting parents or separated parents, or some factors like this, or some death of a loved one, like let's say one parent expires, something like that. Then genetics or genotype or interaction with the environment or gender. Okay, deformities sometimes in terms of genes. Okay, they can also affect intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence. When we talk about emotional intelligence, two very important people are Peter Salovey and John Mayer. They were the first people who spoke about emotional intelligence. Now, can you quickly read that definition from the slide? Most definitions of emotional intelligence will be on the lines of understanding, using, and managing emotions in self and others. Most definitions will be touching upon these lines. Okay. Now, after them was Daniel Goleman, who has further researched on emotional intelligence, and his book is there, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, which gained lots of fame and popularity. And these are 5 skills, very important skills, which he said that people possess because of emotional intelligence. If I ask you which one is more important in life, general intelligence or emotional intelligence? Or which one do you have? You don't know what you have. Which is more important in life, to live life, general intelligence or emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence. Can think of anyone who is emotionally intelligent, emotionally competent? In those days, maybe somebody can relate with this, maybe you have like a grandmother or some older lady from the family. They will tell you, I had 4 children, 5 children, I had no money, husband used to be a drunkard, abusive marriage. But still they worked hard, they raised their children, they didn't crack under pressure. These are classic examples of emotionally intelligent people. See, sometimes we have people who are holding big positions, very educated, making a lot of money, and you think that professionally they are very successful professionally. But their patterns of living are toxic, they're rigid in mentality, and some slightest inconvenience, they crumble like a cookie. Is that an example of an emotionally intelligent person? No. Hello. But like you must have just sidelined that grandmother of yours. That was everybody's story that time. Not necessarily. Maybe it was everybody's story, but they were tough people, right? They were hardcore and they fought life in their own ways. Right? Okay. Then we have the other topic, that is personality. There are many theories of personality, but this is mentioned in their syllabus. That is the Gordon Allport's trait theory. So he said there are three types of traits: cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. Okay. So cardinal traits are rare to be found in people, but if they are there in people, he said that the person's life will revolve around those traits. So there will be strong determinants of that person's personality. For example, Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, what was his cardinal trait? Non-violence, Satyagraha, this was his cardinal trait. Mother Teresa, what was the cardinal trait? Service to mankind. So these are rare traits, but if they are there, then predominantly the person's life will revolve around those traits. Okay. Then we have central traits. They are present in a lot of people, all of us maybe. Now they may not be that radical in nature, but they do determine our personalities to a great extent. Traits like that of altruism, brotherhood, universal fellowship, respect for other people's religion, okay, these type of traits. And then we have secondary traits or like the less defined traits. These are more on the lines of preferences of the person. Like somebody, let's say, likes chocolates, or she likes ethnic clothes. You know, these type of traits, less defined. Then we also have stages of psychosocial development, which is another personality theory. This is by Erik Erikson. Look at the stages here. There are 8 stages. You know the 8 stages, but if you notice, the first 5 are more important to us because we are dealing with children. Okay? So please know the first 5 stages in detail, and the other ones you know for information. Okay? Things that are mostly writing on the board, you try to take down those things. Slides, don't worry, you will have this PPT by today evening. Then we have adjustment and mental health. What is the opposite of adjustment? Maladjustment. A normal of normal. Now there could be various reasons why children or people can be maladjusted. Okay, there are some characteristics of a well-adjusted person. So a person who has good adjustment will be, balanced physically, emotionally, socially, will not be rigid in thought pattern, will be a flexible person, will be realistic, okay, not unrealistic, will aspire, will be positively influenced, may also influence other people positively, okay. And there are some causes of maladjustment, which could be personal, genetic, physical, or inherent nature of the person, or environmental. Let's quickly understand each one of these with an example. Personal causes could be personal cause of a person to be maladjusted. Yes, death of a loved one, some family issue, something like that. Okay. And genetic factors. Genetic factor or something that is biological nature causing an adjustment means mostly to do with impairments of a person, okay, or some handicap or something like that. No, we have visually impaired children, children who some polio dose is missed, or are hard of hearing, partially blind, partially deaf, these kind of children. Then we have physical or physiological factors. Again, heredity is when it is there in the family, that reason. Genetic is more to do with impairments. Okay, don't be confused. So, heredity could be, let's say, some sickness in the family that is got passed on. Okay, which is causing maladjustment. The inherent nature of the person means because of the traits of the person. Like sometimes you say, just doesn't get along. There are no people like that. Sometimes you have some people like say the staff room now. Teacher just can't get along with anybody. Can't do group work all by herself. Loner or has this very difficult, complicated personality. That's why Mara adjusted. Okay? Or environmental causes like some calamity or something like that. This year Goa got flooded, no? Those parts of Valpo, so many places were flooded. On television, we must have seen people's books and bags and washing machine, everything floating like this, everything, a whole house was out. You think it doesn't affect the person? It does, right? Sometimes people who have experienced floods, droughts, earthquakes and all, they even get this PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, milder forms, but they do get it sometimes. All this can cause maladjustment in a person. The role of teachers in the process of adjustment, what can you do as a teacher? Some points here. Okay, reaching out, understanding. The basic role of a teacher is to be cautious and alert to spot if people have, reasons or there is some maladjustment happening. Mostly teachers will say, "Who must be kota?" Very naughty child, not listen. Naughty is the classic word. Why the child is naughty? What is the reason? Sometimes people children who need love will show in the most unloving ways that they need that love or attention or appreciation. Okay? So firstly you have to be alert enough to spot that. Then only maybe you can do the other things and play the role of a person who is helping the child to adjust. Okay, then that is your A part, that is child development is over. Now let's come to learning. So what is learning? A relatively permanent change in behavior is learning. Okay, please don't be confused. When we talk about cognition and cognitive theories, there it is more about how people understand and learn at this level. But here, this definition is more in terms of, overt and covert behavior. No? Here it is more in terms of observable standards. So, classroom transaction, why I have picked up this definition is because classroom transactions is something that is observable by the teacher. You give a lesson, at the end of the lesson, you ask questions in the classroom. If the students are answering your questions, it means that teacher learning process was successful, means learning has taken place. Right or wrong? You write a fantastic lesson plan, let's say, your teacher also appreciates it. You go to the class, try to execute that lesson plan. People can't understand, children can't understand. So what has happened? Learning has taken place? No. Why do you think that has happened, that children could not understand what you were teaching when your lesson plan is really beautiful? Why? What would be probable reasons? All your classes were fantastic, I think, your lessons. What were the reasons? Very good. Sometimes teacher doesn't have an understanding of the prior knowledge or previous knowledge of the child. That's why what you start the lesson with sometimes revising old knowledge. Or maybe your lesson is irrelevant to the audience. Let's say it's a class or you are born in the classroom knowing that they are cities kids. But let's say the lesson is being given in a very rural class, rural type of children. No, rural children and urban children are sometimes different. They don't understand the same things. Or maybe your lesson is not age appropriate, it's a bit irrelevant then. Okay? Many reasons like this there can be. But long story short, this learning was not successful because you could not see observable changes in behavior. Simple. Okay? Now, characteristics of learning is progressive. Progressive means going forward, bettering, developing, that is progressive. Then learning is creative, transferable, You have to agree with this as teachers. If it's not transferable, then how will your students learn from you? Okay? It's cooperative, means you can learn from each other, and socially conditioned. Okay? It's also goal-directed, means you always are teaching your children with the intention of they being able to learn. You're not vaguely doing anything. It's systematic, it's organized. Okay? And it is continuous and universal. So learning takes place all over the world. Now, domains of learning, popular. See this, familiar? It's coming back to you, right? I hope it is coming back to you. So we have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So all your syllabus, design, curriculum, everything, transactions, all that is done with keeping in mind these three domains or four areas of learning. Then we have different learning styles in you as people, I'm sure. Some people like to always study best in the morning, some people learn best in the night, some like to study with absolute silence, some maybe learn best with little music in the background. Different people learn differently. Some are mongers, some are writers. So there is this model that is VARK, which is given by Neil Fleming. He said that children are learning mostly via different ways best, and some of them are auditory learners, some of them are visual learners, some of them are kinesthetic or tactile learners. Okay, you studied this model, right? Yes, students? Yes? Okay. Then we have laws of learning. Which are the laws of learning? Law of readiness and law of exercise, very good, and law of effect. Law of effect. Law of exercise, under it has law of use and disuse. You remember, right? So it's three laws with one law having two subparts. Sometimes they say five, but it's actually three. Are you clear until now? Okay. Okay, I'll start with this after the break. Let us take a 10-minute break. What's the time on your watch? It's 11:10, I think. 5 minutes is good for you? 11:15? Are you moving out or sitting here? You can sit here also. Some of you maybe want to go to the washrooms. We are there. So maybe go and come. But exactly in 5 minutes or maximum 7 minutes, please come back.